What's good, y'all? And welcome to another preseason preview video. In today's video, we're going over the Los Angeles Clippers. In case this is your first preseason preview video of mine that you're seeing, basically what I do is go over all the offseason moves, give a little recap there, and then look into the future and try to see what we can expect in this upcoming season. Before we get into it, I want to remind you guys to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. Once you're done watching this video, there's a link in the description that'll bring you to a playlist of all the other teams that I've done so far. Without further ado, let's take a look at the additions that Clippers made this offseason. The Clippers were very busy this offseason, signing a bunch of different people in free agency, including guys like Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn, Nicholas Batum, and Mo Bamba. Now, I'm sure you guys already know, but we'll talk about the losses that the Clippers had this offseason in a little bit. But because of that big loss, that opened up a lot of cap space for the Clippers, and based on these signings, it seems like they want to do a little bit of an identity shift. Starting off with Derrick Jones Jr., he was a super important piece to the Dallas Mavericks finals run that they had last season. He was a starter for them. He was their #1 perimeter defender. He did that at a super high level. Offensively, he had a career year shooting the ball from three, also being just super athletic as a cutter. I think he'll be able to come in here for the Clippers and provide them with that much needed defense. And then also just kind of be that seamless fit on offense and kind of just go with the flow. And similar things can be said about Chris Dunn as well, another guy they brought in. He is one of the best perimeter guard defenders in the NBA, super underrated on that facet of his game. But also, when you look offensively for him, he's had a little bit of a career year in Utah. You don't really look for him to do much on the offensive end, but he's got his three-point shot to be around league average. He's a solid playmaker when he has the ball in his hands also. So like Derrick Jones Jr., I think both of these guys are going to be able to bring their defense and then kind of just fit in where they can on offense. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I feel like Nicholas Batum is kind of a very similar player in that aspect where he brings a lot of defensive intensity with his length. And then he's just a great catch and shoot guy, a little bit of playmaking in there, one of those cerebral players that just kind of makes the right play at the right time. You Los Angeles Clippers fans should know him very well, as he was on the team last year, got traded in James Harden's trade, and now he's back on the team, so it all works out in the end. And then the last guy I want to cover is Mo Bamba, who's also coming over from Philly. He is a solid rim protector, can shoot the three ball a little bit as well, and just I think he's going to be able to come in and be a solid backup center for the Clippers. And now for the elephant in the room, it's time to talk about the guys the Clippers lost this offseason. Arguably the biggest free agent this offseason was Paul George, and he decided to sign a new contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. The Clippers also lost Russell Westbrook. He was included in a sign and trade for Chris Dunn. He was eventually bought out and signed a new contract with the Denver Nuggets. And then Daniel Tice signed a new contract with the New Orleans Pelicans. Whenever you lose 2 out of your top 5 to 6 players in one offseason, it's not a very good look for your team. Obviously, Paul George was super important for the Clippers for the past few seasons now, being their second best player. At times when Kawhi is down, or just even when he is in the game, he has been the Clippers' best player. He's a guy that brings you shot creation. He can play off the ball. His three-point shot is incredible. Defensive intensity. His playmaking is there, rebounding the ball, leadership. He's one of those guys that brings so much to your team that when you lose him, it's definitely going to be felt. And I do think the Clippers are going to feel this loss a lot. It is really unfortunate that they weren't able to work out a sign and trade or anything really, and just literally lost him for absolutely nothing. The silver lining here is it did open up a lot of cap space and allowed the Clippers to sign all of those free agents we were just talking about. But if you ask me, if you're saying, do you want Paul George or that group of guys, I'm probably going to be taking Paul George. Losing Russell Westbrook is very interesting, as well as he is one of the most polarizing players in the NBA. I think the Clippers did a pretty solid job at utilizing him to his best abilities. But I do think that once they traded for James Harden, it kind of negated some of what he does best, and that is, of course, his ball handling / playmaking. That's when they relegated him to the bench, and then you saw a little bit more of a jolt from his production. But all in all, I think for both parties, it's probably best that Russ was able to kind of just get a brand new start. Like I said, he was involved in a sign and trade for Chris Dunn, so the Clippers did actually get something back for Russ. And then Daniel Tice was a very solid backup center for the Clippers last year, providing them them with some quickness at that center spot, switchability, solid defense. And I think Mo Bamba is going to be able to fill in that center position, not bringing a lot of the stuff that Daniel Tice brought, but he is an upgrade when you talk about size-wise, rim protection. I think Daniel Tice is probably the least of the Clippers' worries right now when you talk about their losses. And now that we know who's came and who's went, let's take a look at a potential rotation we could be seeing from the Clippers. In the starting lineup, we have James Harden, Terrence Mann, Derrick Jones Jr., Kawhi Leonard, and Ivica Zubac. And then off the bench, we have Chris Dunn, Amir Coffey, Norman Powell, Nicholas Batum, and Mo Bamba. I'm sure you guys realized when we were going over the moves the Clippers made this offseason, but their roster turnover is a lot. When you just compare rosters from last season to this season, you could tell that losing Paul George definitely hurts. Just talent for talent wise, it doesn't really compare. And depending on the health of Kawhi Leonard, that talent drop-off can become even more immense. It's already been reported that Kawhi is not a full participant in training camp. He's really just focusing on rehabbing his knee, which he had surgery for this last offseason. And the Clippers have said that they will be, quote, very cautious when it's coming to Kawhi Leonard. And that, as a fan of basketball, really scares me, and I'm sure as a fan of the Clippers, that scares you guys as well. And the Clippers are in a pretty weird spot when you just look at all the stuff that's happening to them and when you look at the rest of the teams in the NBA. Obviously, losing Paul George for nothing, that definitely hurts when you lose your second best player. Now, Kawhi Leonard is still struggling with health, which he has been for the last few seasons now. This season, they're opening up the Intuit Dome. You know, they have a lot of big expectations for this new arena. The Clippers are finally getting their own arena in California. And just from a business and money standpoint, it makes sense to try to have the best team possible to draw in fans to this new arena and this new experience. Also, the fact that they don't have their own draft picks, it makes sense to really just try to win as many games as possible. But when you look at this roster, I really feel like it should be a rebuild. They should be selling in my eyes. I understand why they don't when you look at the grand scheme of things. Like, they're not going to get a lot of value back if they do want to trade Kawhi or James Harden at this point. Like I said, all the stuff with the arena and stuff, it makes sense. I'm not saying that Steve Ballmer and them are stupid for this, but just when you look at a pure basketball standpoint, I feel like the Clippers are kind of setting it up where they're going to be a disappointment. And now that we have an idea of what this Clipper team might look like, let's take a look at their biggest strength. I kind of hinted at it before, but with the free agent signings the Clippers made this offseason, they really put an emphasis on their defense. I only listed 5 players right here, but they have a lot of really high-level defenders on this roster at a bunch of different positions. If I'm banking on one thing for the Clippers, it's the fact that their defense will be very, very good this season. I feel like they have a good chance of having like a top 10 defense. When you just look at their roster top to bottom, they have at least one high-level defender at each position. So that means no matter who they're going against, they should have one good option to put on that player. When you're looking for their guard defenders, that is, of course, Chris Dunn. I kind of mentioned that before when talking about the acquisition of him. He is one of the best guard defenders in the NBA right now. I feel like he's kind of overlooked because he's just been bouncing around the league for the last few seasons, but in the last season and a half that he's been in Utah, he's really solidified himself as one of those top-end defenders, and then also has kind of helped his offensive game raise a little bit where he's able to be a key rotational player for teams. But if the Clippers are going against a guy like Steph Curry or Jalen Brunson or Donovan Mitchell, Chris Dunn is the guy that you definitely want to stick on them. Then when you look at the wings, they have plenty of options there. Starting off by talking about Derrick Jones Jr. He's best at those kind of lanky wings and those, maybe even some shooting guards and stuff like that. Guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a perfect example. He's really good at using his length to disrupt those guys. But he also has the athleticism and the length to play guys that are more small forwards and maybe even some power forwards depending on the matchups. I don't think he will be having to guard some of those bigger guys though, because the Clippers have plenty of other options like Kawhi Leonard, assuming he's healthy. I know he's not anywhere near the level defender he once was. He still is a super smart defender though. He still has those same instincts. He still knows when to pick and choose, when to go up for the block, and when to poke the ball out. He's still a super impactful player, and he is versatile as well. Can guard some shooting guards, some threes, some fours. And then Nicholas Batum is the biggest out of all of these guys that I mentioned so far for wing defenders. And he is arguably one of the most versatile as as well with his combination of length and foot speed. He's 6'8" and can guard some of those 4s and 3s, but we just saw in this last year's playoffs when he was with the 76ers, he was guarding Jalen Brunson for periods at a time. It's just a lot of high quality defensive personnel when you talk about the perimeter, and then when you look at who's anchoring it down low, you have Zubac, who is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated rim protectors and paint protectors. He's not one of those guys that are going to jump out the gym and be blocking shots left and right, but he's a smart defender. He's a great positional defender. He's good in drop coverage for the pick and rolls. He's great at taking up space and deterring people from getting shots off at the rim. Great at closing out possessions too with his rebounds. And funny enough, if you look at all these 5 defenders, they would make a solid lineup, I would say. And if at any point all 5 of these guys are on the court at the same time, I don't know how the other team is going to score. Of course, no team is perfect though, so now let's take a look at the Clippers' biggest weakness. The Clippers have a serious lack of on-ball creators on their roster. Right here, I listed out the guys that I would be confident with the ball in their hands, and it's a very short list. You, of course, have Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, and then Norman Powell. Now, I will say, if Kawhi Leonard has a relatively healthy season and is there for majority of the year, this weakness shrinks a little bit in my mind, but that's, again, banking on Kawhi being healthy, and coming into the year, it seems like he is not fully healthy, and that scares me a lot. That would leave you with just James Harden and Norman Powell for a majority of games to be your main creators. And obviously in the past, we've seen James Harden be that sole creator and do so much for a team, carry them offensively. But that was also years ago last time we saw that. James Harden's points per game has been going down and down and down every single season since 2020. I still think that he is an impactful player and a great guy to have to run your point guard and run your offense. But I don't think he's going to be able to turn back the time and be that high-level player that we saw in Houston, where he is just carrying a whole offense. And I know Norman Powell had that quote saying that losing Paul George is addition by subtraction, basically, and says it opens up opportunity for guys like him to be more of an offensive player. True, very true. I can't fault you there, Norm, but is that what you want for your team? I don't really know. I think Norman Powell is best as that 6-man role, kind of just being that spark plug, and I think he can do a good job at that, and of course more shots will be going his way. But when you lose a guy like Paul George, who's a great on-ball creator, and then also a guy like Russell Westbrook, who's able to create for himself and others as well, it leaves you with that big hole right there that they didn't fill in the free agency. I will say, if Kawhi starts off the year injured and is out of the lineup, I can see a world where a guy like Kevin Porter Jr. might get some rotational minutes, maybe even Bones Highland if they want to go more of that route. But fully healthy, I don't know if either of those guys make the rotation. I do think both of them can provide some self-creation and some offensive scoring punch. But when you look at the fully healthy roster, I like a lot of the other guys at the guard and what they bring compared to what these guys would. And now it is time for my ceiling, floor, and expectations for the Clippers. Starting off with their ceiling, I could see them being as high as the 8th seed. Now I know this would probably be very disappointing for Clippers fans to fall all the way down to the play-in tournament after being one of those top-level teams in the West, but like I said throughout this whole video, relying on a healthy Kawhi after we've seen time and time again that usually doesn't happen definitely is very questionable for me. And then also the fact that their offense, in my eyes, would be pretty bad. I don't see them being very high in the standings. That's without even mentioning how deep the Western Conference is, how many top-level teams are in this conference this year. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for the Clippers to really have a successful season. I do think if they make it as the 8th seed, they would win at least one of their play-in tournament games and make the playoffs. I think in a single elimination game, assuming Kawhi is there, there's not many other players I would want on my team besides Kawhi. James Harden, he can really have some high-level performances as well. And then, like I said, I do think their defense is going to be very high quality. So I think they make the playoffs as their ceiling, but I don't think they'll be able to win one of those upsets in the first round. So I do think at their ceiling, they are a first-round exit. When you look at their floor, I can see them being as low as the 12th seed out west. I know that sounds insane, but when you look at just how many teams are fighting for that play-in tournament and fighting for that playoff berth, there are legitimately 12 or 13 teams that I could see making the play-in tournament out west and being like, yeah, that's not too big of a surprise. And obviously, in this world where it is at their floor, they would be dealing with injuries between Kawhi, maybe even James Harden misses some games, and then at that point, their offense is going to halt to a stop. And their defense, it only can carry them so far. So at their floor, I can see them being a lottery team. And for my expectations, I would put them probably around the 11th seed. I do think the Clippers will miss the play-in tournament this year. It's a big mixture between the fact that I do think that they lost a lot of talent and got worse this offseason, and the fact that the Western Conference got a lot better and has a lot of high-quality teams. That paired together is a recipe for disaster for Clippers fans, and unfortunately, I think that that's where they'll end up. What about you guys, though? Let me know in the comments below where you think the Clippers will end in this year's standings. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the description, there's links to all my social medias, so make sure you follow me on all those to keep up to date with me. Catch y'all.